When I moved into this office almost 3 years ago, I wanted to set up a state-of-the-art miniature hobby live stream, complete with a fully kitted out painting desk with ceiling-mounted equipment, a gaming area with 4 built-in cameras and lights, a stacked production computer to control it all, complete with 8 4K HDMI inputs, a beast of an audio interface, and to top it all off, I can control it with my voice. Computer, turn on the painting set.
Okay.
Never gets old. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my setup. I'm going to tell you what I would do differently if I did this all again a second time, and I'm also going to tell you the biggest lesson I learned in my YouTube career. Let's start with the area that I got mostly right, the painting set. My main painting camera is a Panasonic GH7 that's powered by a dummy battery, so I don't have to rely on actual batteries for a live production. It has a full-size HDMI that runs from here up to the ceiling and then from a pillar to my streaming computer, and that's how the majority of cameras on both sets are currently configured. Panasonic has been my go-to brand for video cameras for shooting and streaming miniature painting, and there are a couple reasons why. One, it's a micro 4/3 camera sensor, which means there's less depth of field, which is great when you're trying to shoot really small things like miniatures. The other biggest reason is the resolution. This camera can shoot in 5.8K resolution, which is amazing for miniature painting because I can frame my shot super wide and then crop in digitally in post. That is extremely helpful because the wider I can frame my shot, the more depth of field I have, which means more stays in focus. The lens that I use is a Panasonic 12 to 60 millimeter lens. Forever I used the 12 to 35, but it's nice to have a couple of super zoomed in shots when you want to demonstrate or show something in detail on stream. I also have power, HDMI, and support equipment set up for a second camera if I ever have a guest during the stream. Now, another way to increase the depth of field you have while painting miniatures is to increase the number of the aperture. Because closing down your aperture makes your image darker, you need bright lights to power it all. And for my set, I have 3 fixtures from the company Intellatech. 2 LC160s to light my painting area, and an LC120 to light my face so it looks nice for the camera. These fixtures are super nice because they're diffuse, but their diffusion material isn't super wide, and so they can be put above my set and not take up a bunch of vertical space, like a lot of other diffused LED fixtures. I also have some smaller Intellatech Cobb-style LEDs in the back that light the background to make sure that my main webcam shot looks great. I also have one top-down camera, a Panasonic GX85, and I use this for demonstrating things like what I'm mixing on my palette and anything else that would require a top-down angle, as opposed to this camera's more angled shot. I also have a computer monitor, which is completely necessary to make sure that I don't get my big dumb head in the way of the model, which doesn't always work. I also have a wireless keyboard here so I can control the computer over there to change shots during stream. Lastly, I have a crusty old Pixel 2 phone here that I use to remotely control this camera with the Panasonic camera app, which is necessary because the arm it's attached to is springy. The app allows me to adjust the exposure and also the focus, so I don't need to touch the camera so often and cause that shake to happen, because even the tiniest shake is obvious in camera when shooting miniatures. To capture audio for the painting live stream and also for the gaming live stream, I use wireless mics, specifically Sennheiser G3s with a Countryman B6 microphone. I did put XLR in the ceiling so I could run mics to all the sets, but it just doesn't work out very well. Specifically as to why a microphone doesn't work great while you're live streaming, it's because while you're painting, you're often crouched over, and a lot of the good audio is right in this area going into the desk, as opposed to going straight out. So a microphone right here is actually really nice. For gaming, you're often standing up to move models around on whatever battlefield you're playing on, or to reach the dice tray to roll some dice. So a microphone that moves with you is preferred. There's also a metric ton of support gear and cables that I am kind of glossing over that are all up in the ceiling. All of the electronics for both sets are plugged into a surge protector that then gets plugged into a smart outlet that's here in the ceiling, which allows me to turn them on and off with voice commands. And that wraps up the painting area. Now let's move over to the gaming area, and one quick caveat. I also use all this equipment for my YouTube business. Not all of it was solely purchased just to do live streaming, but all of it is used to do the live stream as well. For the gaming area, that's a little bit less true. Everything you see over here was predominantly used for largely gaming live streams. I did shoot one video in this area, and it's absolutely capable of it, but mostly this was all live stream. Let's start at the base. No gaming setup is complete without a beautiful table, and a beautiful table this is. From Bandpass Design out of Washington, this table features cup holders, magnet accessible storage areas, sections for you to hold gaming tokens, slots to hold cards, and also a reversible top with a pit below. Each presenter has a tablet that allows them to see chat, see sub notifications, but also sometimes when it was working, draw on the screen so you could talk about tactics and draw emphasis to certain parts of the game. Or if you're a child like me, you can use them to draw dicks. Don't lie to me, that's the first thing you would do too. Speaking of being able to see things, there's another computer monitor rigged up right there, so both hosts at any time can see what the actual stream is seeing as well. Speaking of player cameras, let's talk about the kind of camera that I'm using for all of the cams on this set, which is a Panasonic G95. And this comes to one of the first things that I would change about this set. These cameras were on sale when I bought them, so they were nice and cheap, but in order to get them to a more usable state, I had to do quite a bit. Firstly, they use micro HDMI, and HDMI in general for long cable runs is just not a good solution. Furthermore, micro HDMI specifically is very flimsy and very easy to bend and break. So I immediately converted them to full-size HDMI with the help of an adapter and also a custom piece of rigging that I designed in 3D and printed. Secondly, I need 3 separate cables to run this camera. One that goes from here to the ceiling, inside the ceiling to this post, and then from the post to the computer. And that is not cheap when you multiply it by 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras. Lastly, these cameras also have dummy batteries, just like the one over on the painting set, which brings us to a grand total of 8 separate connection points that are not locked down, which means if any single one of those things loosen over time, this whole camera is not gonna work, and then it's gonna require time figuring out which thing is loose. The kind of camera you want for a setup like this is something called a box cam, which is what this Zcam E2C is. And I replaced the G95 up here because this camera is the most inconvenient to get to and adjust, and this camera does a lot. I bought this camera used off eBay. So not only was it cheaper than all of the other cameras, but it also comes with way more features and doesn't give up anything those other cameras do. Firstly, there is one cable that runs from this camera to the rest of my setup, and that is an Ethernet cable. Not only are Ethernet cables dirt cheap when compared to HDMI, but they're also locking. So there's much less concern about one of these things becoming loose over time. This little cable is actually pulling a lot of weight. Hello, not only is that cable powering the camera through power over Ethernet, but it allows us to solve the biggest problem that box cameras typically have, and that's that you can't really adjust the settings or see what you're shooting. Zcam makes a piece of software called the Zcam controller, which allows you to affect every single menu setting on that camera right here on the computer. You can also look at the footage you're going to record, start and stop recording, and a bunch of other settings. It's super convenient. Along with that, you can use a protocol called SSP in OBS to get the footage into OBS so you can use it in the live stream. Now, the one downside of this whole setup is that in order for footage to travel through the network to this computer, it needs to be compressed, which means it isn't the full fat, sexy footage that comes right off the cameras like it would if it was HDMI. But the image you're seeing right now is the image that goes out to stream. So even though it is a little compressed, it still looks pretty good. Furthermore, the image that goes up to Twitch is gonna be compressed already, so it's not like the loss in quality is that big of a deal. Also, if you have a setup like this and you want to get nicer recordings, just put SD cards in all the cameras and record to the camera itself, and you'll get the full resolution, beautiful image. One more caveat with this setup is that in order to use power over Ethernet, you need a special switch. You can't just use any switch you got, but it wasn't very expensive, and if you had multiple of these cameras, they could all use the exact same switch. Now, even though this camera is literally perfect for what I'm trying to do with this setup, there is one thing that I might change about it, and that is its angle. Right now, it's pointed straight down at the table. So that means if you ever have terrain features or anything that has any kind of verticality, it really flattens that. It makes it look much less impressive. I want to play around with the idea of moving it forward or backward a bit and then angling it so you can see some of that height and verticality. I think that'd be a much more interesting shot. Let's wrap up this comparison by putting it into context. Each G95 that I have cost me $700, which included the lens, and requires 3 HDMI cables, a dummy battery, and an HDMI to micro HDMI adapter. And that's for each camera. Furthermore, if you want to use HDMI, your computer needs to have an HDMI capture card so that OBS knows how to access your cameras. My used E2C costs $650 or $900 new, and uses an Ethernet cable that I got out of my giant 1,000-foot spool that I already have, a powered switch, and that's it. And as if all of the previous information wasn't enough of an incentive, if I had 10 of these cameras, I wouldn't have 10 cables running to this computer. I would only ever have one Ethernet cable that you likely already have plugged into your computer to get internet anyways. Rarely in life is there ever a solution to a problem that is not only cheaper, but better and simpler. And to round out the cameras on this particular set, I have one last G95 that's pointing straight down, often at a dice box, so you can see the results when we're rolling dice in games. That puts this setup at 5 cameras total. Dice cam, 2 player cams, a top-down cam, and the very last cam that you haven't seen yet. The very last camera in both of my setups is the camera that I'm shooting on right now, a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera that's on a tripod on wheels. And it connects to my computer through wireless HDMI, so I can use this sole camera for both setups. All right, and with the camera chat done, let's talk about the lights. I'm sure these lights look familiar to you. They're the same ones as over there in Teletech LC160s. The only difference is that the diffusive material I replaced with something that looks more like a China ball. This front light is what's mostly illuminating our players, and I want it to be big and soft. Outside of that, I have 2 Godox SL60Ws that were supposed to be for lighting the background for each of the player cams, but that never really happened. And also a whole host of cheapo LED panels that are lighting the background with some color, but also just some light. It's always important to not forget about your background. If you only buy lights for the people and also the things that's in the foreground, everything in the background looks dark and very sad. And outside of a bunch of rigging equipment and cables, that is everything that goes into this setup. But because it was the first time I ever set up a gaming setup, there is a massive problem that I didn't consider. One of the coolest parts about the wargaming hobby is getting to enjoy the miniatures, and every single shot that I've described so far don't really highlight any of the awesome modeling going on in these games. I think in order to have a successful gaming live stream, you need to have some close-up shots of what's going on so you can see the cool models and the cool paint jobs. We tried to solve that in a number of ways. One, I have a sliding camera rig from Rhino that we use to pan back and forth during a live stream, and the stream producer could switch to it for an extra accent shot whenever they wanted, but that didn't really work out very well. All of the lights in this set are top down, so they were casting shadows on the miniatures, and it wasn't even zoomed in that much, and it didn't give you that much flexibility, so I can't really recommend that as a solution. We also bought a webcam called the Instalink 360, which has the ability to remotely control where it's pointing. So we could rig it up somewhere in the ceiling and then point to an area of interest and then cut to that camera. Which that kind of leads us into the best solution for how to get awesome shots of close details as they're happening in a live event. And that is something called PTZ, or Pan, Tilt, Zoom. PTZ refers to a camera's ability to affect its pan, tilt, and zoom, and sometimes focus remotely, kind of like this Instalink camera does as it's tracking me. Now, one of the bigger problems of PTZ is that it's kind of hard to find. You most often find it in security cameras, which makes sense, but for our purposes isn't really helpful, because for the most part, security camera footage is kind of bad, which may not be the case nowadays or in the future. But if you wanted to use a camera like the G95 or the E2C, it's up there in the ceiling, you can get a PTZ system to attach to it. In fact, the one that I found was from Data Video and is kind of reasonably priced. And that wraps up the gaming set. So the last thing to go over is this beast streaming computer setup. I'll list all the specs on the screen, but the one that I want to call out is the Blackmagic Intensity Pro 4X 4K capture card that with 2 of them gives us 8 4K inputs, enough to power all the cameras that matter on both painting sets. These capture cards are absolute beasts and allow for so much more functionality than we are leveraging them for, specifically allowing you to record to RAW over HDMI right to your computer and so many other things. Now, admittedly, having 8 4K inputs is a bit of an overkill if your system is entirely HDMI. You probably only need really 2. One for the main painting camera and one for the gaming top-down as well. Having a 4K source for your top-down camera for gaming would be nice because you could have predefined zoomed-in zones like bottom left, center, or top right, and you could zoom into those areas of interest whenever action was going on there to get a closer shot of the miniatures. But as a reminder up there, that camera doesn't require any kind of capture card or HDMI cables because it does everything over Ethernet and it's still 4K. Have I sold you on this idea yet? For my audio interface, I'm rocking a Scarlett 18i20, which is probably overkill, but all my microphones plug into this, and then in Reaper on the computer, we apply things like noise removal, compression, and all sorts of stuff like that. Also, like a lot of other streamers, I have a Stream Deck that allows for hotkeying very specific actions, and when it's working 85% of the time, it's really useful. Lastly, I have an Audio-Technica AT2040 here in case the producer ever wants to say anything on stream. Now, one massive thing that I am glossing over in this setup is the software setup. There is so much stuff running on this computer to enable everything going on in this stream. Video software like OBS, audio software like Reaper, and also a piece of software that I had to employ someone to make because as far as I could tell, it didn't exist. A lot of board games and miniature war games have a lot of little tokens and cards that get played during the game that you would never be able to see on such a wide top-down shot. But with this little app that I had developed called Card Display, you can point it at a directory of images and you can call up those images and show them during the stream with no glare and nothing on it so that you can read it nicely. And after seeing all this awesome gear, that begs the question, what was the most important lesson I learned in my YouTube career? When I moved into this office, I had some excess capital that I wanted to use to reinvest into my business. And I did that by reinvesting into live streaming and also gaming, not only streaming, but also recording games as well. But my live stream never really went anywhere performance-wise. Even with all this amazing equipment, you can't get by one of the most important things when it comes to running a social media business. Every platform, TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, wants you to sacrifice your body at its altar, meaning you need to spend all of your available time focusing on that platform. And that wasn't the case with Twitch. I streamed painting once a week. I streamed gaming once every other week, which is nowhere near enough to make an impact on those platforms. So the lesson I learned was this. At any point as a small business owner, if you find yourself with extra money or extra time, you should reinvest that into the thing that is already earning you money. So in my case, that's miniature painting videos. I should have invested in things that made videos come out faster and made them easier to make. And that would have then led to more income that maybe at that point, I can consider growing my business into a totally different vertical, live stream gaming and other stuff. A lot of this equipment that I invested, especially in the gaming side, kind of went to waste because I don't stream at all anymore, painting or gaming, and I haven't recorded a gaming video in a very long time. So not only do I invest my money into a project that made no returns, but I also invested my time as well, which is honestly a bigger problem. That's gonna do it for this video, guys. I know it wasn't a painting one, but hopefully it was still interesting and you learned something. If any questions about the tech or what we did to set things up, leave them down in the comment section below. I'll answer them, and I'll also have all the equipment that I'm using linked down in the description. Those are all affiliate links. If you ever buy them, I get a little kickback at no extra cost to you. If you like the channel and you want to support it, there are a number of ways that you can do that. All things linked down in the description below. Most notably, a Patreon campaign that gets you extra rewards like a Discord server where you and I can hang out any day of the week and chat about your miniature painting projects or how to spice up your live stream. Subscribe and most importantly, don't forget to